Hello, and welcome to the Investor Focus segment of Credit Matters. I'm Mike Skirbo, Senior Director, Standard & Poor's Corporate Ratings Group. Today we're talking about Brazil, obviously a country that has benefited from a relatively strong economy and a stable fiscal regime. In addition, the intermediate-term outlook looks relatively positive given the World Cup and the Olympics over the next several years. Joining me is Milena Zanaboni. She's a Managing Director and Analytical Manager based out of Brazil for Corporate and Infrastructure Ratings. And Art Simonson, also a Managing Director and Analytical Manager here in New York for Project Finance Ratings. Welcome to you both. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Milena, why don't you start, talk about recent trends that you've seen.
The trends for Brazil, I would say, are very positive. We have Brazil in investment grade since 2008. And after a mild recession in 2009, we expect the country to grow almost 6% in 2010 and another 5% in 2011. Part of this growth will come from a very strong domestic market and from investments in infrastructure, which were also a way for the government to offset some of the effects of the global crisis. Corporate ratings have held very well during this crisis, as well as bank ratings. We didn't have one single negative rating action for banks in Brazil, and we expect that the credit quality of all these entities is on the upside.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Art, maybe Milena mentioned infrastructure projects is what we want to talk about here. Well, what types are we talking about?
Well, with the onset of the World Cup and the onset of the Olympics, you have some expenditures that the country has identified that needs to be made. But in addition to that, Brazil has a tremendous amount of infrastructure needs, even without those two major events. Items such as wastewater treatment facilities, power projects, toll roads, ports, airports. Standard & Poor's has done an analysis and has identified over $500 billion of expenditures that needs to take place in Brazil over the next 5 years. Those particular assets are perfect for private sector participation, either through the public-private partnership or through project financing.
Okay, so you mentioned, Art mentioned $500 billion in projects. Milena, how are we thinking, or what's our view on the funding of those projects?
The funding is one of the challenges that the country will face. We have our capital markets is developing. It's part of the strength of the sovereign in recent years, but still is a very plain vanilla capital market. So we're basically talking about corporate bonds and equity issuances. Project finance is something that's been basically funded by quasi-sovereign entities. I talk about the Development Bank of Brazil and some other transfers from the government to these projects. And that is something that has limitations because the banks would have to be capitalized by the sovereign for them to continue to lend, and the sovereign doesn't have much of a fiscal room to make these investments. So the private sector will have to jump in and will have to play an important role in these investments, either as they are already as contractors or operators of these projects or as financiers. One of the things that we believe are very crucial for Brazil is that the pension funds or institutional investors start to look at project finance as a very interesting alternative to sovereign debt. As interest rates tend to go down in Brazil in the long run, project finance will probably be an interesting alternative for pension funds because of their characteristics, long-term and kind of a more predictable flow of revenues.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what Milena says is very important, and is where we've been focusing our particular effort. The fact that these particular investments are long-lived investments, it's a perfect opportunity for the pension funds to match their long-term liabilities with an asset that provides them with long-term cash flow. It's something that we expect to develop more in Brazil, and we're actually out there meeting with the right parties to go over the credit fundamentals of these particular projects, how we view them, what we see as the risks, with the key risk being what is the stability of cash flow each particular asset throws off.
Great. Well, thank you both for joining. Appreciate it. Appreciate the insights you provided.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This has been this edition of Credit Matters. We'll see you again next time.